How's it going, everybody? I'm Dave Glavin, an aspiring NBA salary cap strategist. And today I'm going to be discussing the Denver Nuggets salary cap sheet, as well as projecting some upcoming extensions for Christian Braun and Peyton Watson. So, following last year's loss to OKC in the conference semifinals, it was clear that they needed more depth around their core of Jokic and Murray. The biggest move they made this offseason was moving Michael Porter Jr. and their only tradable first round pick in 2032 to Brooklyn for Cam Johnson, who not only is an upgrade to their starting lineup and their two-way versatility, but they also saved $70 million when taking into account the repeater tax penalties. This move signals to me a commitment to sacrificing their future to maximize the talents of the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. And that's a theme that I want to discuss in this video. They also brought in veterans like Jonas Valanciunas, Bruce Brown, and Tim Hardaway Jr. And I feel like the biggest question now surrounding their depth is what kind of contributions they can expect from their young guys. While they won't be depending on them as much as they have in the past couple of seasons, if one of Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, or Deron Holmes can make a real impact in the rotation, it'll be huge for them. The tools that they have at their disposal this season to upgrade the roster are limited. They do have access to the full non-tax mid-level exception, just above $14 million, as well as the biannual exception. And these can be used as trade exceptions, but they don't have much in terms of assets to give up in a deal to bring someone back. They have one tradable second-round pick. They have 4 pick swaps that on a team with Nikola Jokic are not too desirable. Unless they're willing to give up a guy like Peyton Watson, they don't feel like they want to bring him back. I don't think there's much to offer in a deal to upgrade the roster using those exceptions. If they can find a way to get off Zeke Najee's deal, that would be fantastic. But I think we've seen from this past offseason and the past season that's going to be unlikely. Something else to note, they do have a significant amount of unlikely to be earned bonuses over the next 2 seasons, this season and next season. I'm a little surprised that Aaron Gordon's new extension includes these just because they knew that they're going to count against the aprons. But just something to note as it is a little bit higher than other teams, and the aprons are relevant for them. They sit just above the luxury tax, about $400,000 over. Plenty of flexibility to get below that if they wish. They would have to get below it this year and next year to reset their repeater clock. They're in the repeater tax. But I really don't think that's the way to go in the middle of Jokic's prime. We see Boston doing that right now, kind of resetting their financials, but they're in a different situation with Tatum out for an extended period of time, whether that be this whole season or a majority of this season. And fresh off a title, similar to Denver in that sense, but I don't think that's the route for Denver here. So getting into Brown's extension first, last summer they let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope walk because they were confident that he could fill that role, and he did exactly that. And I feel like that should be the starting point for the negotiation from Brown's side. 15 points a game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, incredibly efficient, 67 true shooting percentage. He improved his free throw percentage by over 10%. A couple more stats from cleaning the glass. He's in the 99th percentile for points per shot attempt, which highlights that efficiency. Plus 14 net rating last season, second on the team behind Jokic, as well as in the 81st percentile for turnover percentage. So he takes care of the ball as well. I feel like he's a fantastic complement to Jokic. Defenders have to respect the 40% from 3, and he punishes them by being a fantastic driver. Shot 72% at the rim last season. A couple of ferocious dunks, memorable dunks. I don't really feel like they have anyone on the roster right now to replace that versatility that he brings. Jokic a couple days ago said he wants to be a Nugget forever, and I feel like this is a guy that you go into the second apron to keep next to Jokic. Denver's leverage here, he's restricted next offseason, so nothing needs to happen before this October 20th deadline. There are a few more teams next offseason that are going to have cap space compared to this past offseason, but a good amount of them are not a threat to sign him, in my opinion. He's a winner. He complements stars well, but I don't see him ending up as a star. If he were to go to a team like Washington or Chicago, I don't see the fit and the value there. Denver can also play the card in the waiting game to see how the addition of Cam Johnson affects Brown's production. They both might take a little bit of a hit statistically compared to where they were last season, which could benefit Denver in negotiations. Cam Johnson has a year remaining on his deal after this coming season. And I think Denver makes a trade like that to keep him around for longer than his current contract. So taking a look at the potential framework of a deal, got 4 years, a little over 119 million, starting at 16% of the salary cap. This definitely might be a little rich for some people. I feel like when we take a look at similar deals, Jalen Suggs is a good comparison. He doesn't bring the same offensive versatility, but he's more impactful defensively. He just received an average of 17% of the cap over the next 5 years. It's a little bit of a different structure. It's descending. So it starts at over 20% of the cap, but it ends at just above 12, I believe. Another deal that was recently signed, Josh Giddey, he just got roughly 15% of the cap. Brown's a better player on both sides of the ball, so I think he should be above that. Trey Murphy, similar, 15%. I feel like he's in that range as well. So while I think my projection might be a little bit on the higher side, I feel like Brown's camp has the leverage of Denver letting KCP walk because of the confidence that they had that he could fill that role. He's going to be a part of, in my opinion, the most well-rounded starting five in the league this upcoming season. And I feel like they should be considered one of, if not the top finals contenders. One thing to note is, does this summer's restricted free agency deter guys from wanting to test the waters next offseason and result in them taking more team-friendly deals? That remains to be seen, but just something that I wanted to bring up. This contract structure would put them roughly $5 million below the second apron next season before taking into account any potential deal for Peyton Watson. I'm assuming all of Jonas Valanciunas' $10 million non-guaranteed salary is not going to count on their books next year. I expect him to be waived, especially with Braun Holmes playing his first minutes this upcoming year. If they were to let Watson walk, they would still need to fill 3 veteran minimum slots, which would account for roughly $7.5 million total, as well as having a $3 million cap hold for their first-round pick. And that would drive their total roster cost to roughly $300 million when you take into account the luxury tax penalties and the repeater tax. And that's about $100 million more than they're going to spend this year if their roster stays the same. They've made the draft pick commitment to building around Jokic, and now I think it's time to make that financial commitment. Ownership needs to come through with the capital required to surround Jokic and really maximize his prime. And we hear a lot of talk about the restrictions of the second apron, and while it can make it difficult to add talent, the Nuggets have the core in place. They don't need to go out and get anyone else to add to that core. I think it's well worth the steep financial penalties. They can be in the second apron for 2 seasons before they have to get out for the following 2 to avoid their first-round pick being dropped to the end of the first round. But if they were to go above these next 2 seasons, it would carry through the end of Jokic's contract, barring an extension where he waives that player option in 27-28. Let's discuss a potential Peyton Watson extension. I want to preface by saying I don't expect the deal to get done before the October 20th deadline. He hasn't been a consistent enough contributor to really warrant the risk of bypassing restricted free agency and giving out a bad contract, i.e. Zeke Nagy from a couple years ago. He's shown some flashes of the two-way versatility he can bring. Shot 45% from the corner threes last season. And had a pretty impressive 2.6 block percentage, which was in the 99th percentile for wings. However, shot 24% on all other threes and had extremely poor on-off numbers, as did most of Denver's bench, especially in the non-Jokic minutes. A deal starting at roughly 5% of the cap, I think, is fair given what he's shown so far. That starts at a little over $8 million, 3 years, $26 million total. I feel like his camp's not going to be on board with that. But back to my point about restricted free agency this past summer, does that affect how players go into it, go into this deadline in a couple of weeks? Are they willing to take more team-friendly deals? That's something I'm really looking out for. If he makes the strides this season without signing a contract before the deadline, could he warrant a full mid-level exception from a team with cap space next offseason? Maybe. So that's a risk that Denver might be willing to take. Same thing applies to Watson as it did with Braun. How does the addition of Cam Johnson affect the minutes that Watson is going to get as well as the touches? It's not nothing, so that has to be mentioned. If they were to go with this type of deal structure and waive Valanciunas similar to the Braun hypothetical, keeping their first-round pick and signing 2 veteran minimums instead of 3, this would cause their total tax bill to be $40 million higher than letting Peyton Watson walk in favor of a vet minimum. That's just something to take into account. That's only for 2026-27. So while the financial penalties are steep, I feel like this is something that's worth it, at least in the case of Braun. And I can see both sides for Watson, but I'd lean towards no right now for him. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Next video is going to be tomorrow, as I'm going to be doing a video every day in October. Thank you.